This is Matt Brown, and you're listening to Just a Good Conversation. The monster is coming for you. Someone built it with the idea that it's going to make your life a lot better. The monster I'm talking about is AI. I talk with commercial photographer and fellow podcaster Michael Durr about how AI might work in the photo industry that's already on life support.
But it's like, why would I pay you $10,000 for that day rate if I can just AI generate it, get 95% of the way there? And then I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe wedding photography is something that, one, I'm naturally okay at. But then two, people are going to want that genuine experience. They're not going to want to have anything change that.
I'm Matt Brown, host of Just a Good Conversation. Take a listen to our archives. My guests have ranged from law enforcement, college professors, creative directors, and professional photographer David Bergman.
I was afraid to talk about money. The best lesson I can give people is you can't be afraid to talk about money. Just fake it till you make it. Everything else in the world runs on money. I'm drinking a bottle of Pellegrino right here. You walk into the store and it's got a price on it. And if you don't want to pay that price, it's fine. But that's the price. And if you think it's too much, the person working at the store isn't going to go home crying, oh my God, they didn't like my Pellegrino. This is the price. And some people can afford it and some people can't. So you have to be the same way with you. Some people can't afford your work, and that's okay.
The rest of my conversation with David can be found on our archives at justagoodconversation.com. Let's take a quick break for a sponsor before diving into my conversation with Michael Durr. Maine Farmhouse Brands was started by Dan McCool, a healthcare professional. His goal was to make premium soap. Most people may not realize how important the right soap is for their health and the difference between soap and detergent. Soap is made from natural ingredients like animal and plant fats, whereas detergent is made from synthetic, often harsh chemicals, even fossil fuels like petroleum. Maine Farmhouse Brands makes their own soap with natural ingredients, free from harsh chemicals. So if you want to keep your skin healthy and clean, I would recommend using Maine Farmhouse Brand soap instead of detergent. You can find their body wash, shave soaps, laundry soap, and beard oils, and more at MaineFarmhouseBrands.com. I have got a man on this podcast that I think will help me get through this minefield of a business. Michael, how are you?
I'm doing great. This is fantastic. This is the second time that I've been on this show.
Second time, but we just finished up your
That's
podcast,
right.
So we're going long.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, I feel an elite company here. I don't know how many people you've had bring back to the show, but
Let's see. Nobody, right? Let's see if I had. Oh, yes, I have. I had Mike Greenlee and I had Jay, but I had him on for different segments. I had Jay to talk about drones.
There you go.
Because that's exploding, and Mike and I were bitching about the Dodgers' failure in the playoffs. So that's all that podcast was us just like pissing and moaning about how they're pulling out people in the wrong inning and whatnot. Yeah, it was just bitter old men bitching about baseball. Yeah. But you and I are going to discuss our industry right now and the industry surrounding it creatively, whether it's in AI or writing or the photographic field, because it is under, I don't want to use the word siege, but it is under change. How are you, from your brand new 40-year-old eyes,
right,
seeing this business today? Because you still have years ahead.
Yeah. My hope is I still have 20 years left, right? And so I think about that stuff, looking at it from a perspective of, okay, I want to play another 20, 25 years.
Right.
I'm in it already maybe 10 or so years. So I've seen a lot of change just from the start to where it is now and then where it's going to go. Where it's going to go, I have no clue, but I can say it's different. Everything feels different tangibly right now. I've talked to enough people that have a sense of either concern, have a sense of optimism, but it's all over the place, right? So everybody's got a different feel to it. From what I'm looking at, it's a lot of volatility, a lot of change. I would say get comfortable with pivoting.
What are you looking at? When you're looking at it, what are you looking at? Are you looking at from your photography field, or are you looking at a broader sense of what's touching the artist's creative field?
I think there's a macro and there's a micro aspect to it, not to sound too Gary Vee-like,
yes,
but basically from a macro standpoint, yes, I think there are technologies that's always evolving. So in any industry, you're going to feel a shift, right? just the simple fact that we have supercomputers in our hand, that has destroyed, in a lot of aspects, the camera industry. How does that affect us? In many ways. AI, how that's going to affect everything. So, and then in the micro standpoint of like individual niche markets, which I think we'll talk about, like editorial markets, about commercial markets, about events, things of that nature,
Right.
all of that will play a little bit more of a nuanced role. So I think I look at both. I look at what is technology as a whole doing? How are people moving, right? Like how do people just think? How do people value things now compared to when they used to? Do we value the news anymore? I don't know. I mean, like that's kind of a rhetorical question. But
I think it's more divided than ever. And I think that's the worst thing is you started getting in silos.
I would
This
agree.
is the camp I listen to, and this is the camp I listen to. It's almost like having divorced parents, right? Mom says this shit about dad, and dad says this shit about mom. And then mom gets a boyfriend, so then dad's crapping on him, and he's crapping on my dad. I don't like my mom's new boyfriend. It just becomes this pissing contest, and you're in the middle just trying to get, the information, like who's picking me up from Little League. That's all I want to know. I don't care about the new boyfriend.
Right. Yeah. Who's getting me pizza?
Right, and that's kind of where the industry is right now. It's so siloed that
Yeah.
I feel like that divorced kid in the middle is just trying to get clarity.
I would say the only thing I would think about is you need to find a way to be somewhat adaptable if you want to stay in it. If you want to pivot out of it, go for it. But if you want to stay in photography, just be willing to pivot a little bit because you're not going to be able to predict exactly what's going to come down the pike. Like I have no idea. Some industries that I really coveted just 2 years ago when we last talked on the podcast. Now I'm like, do I want to go commercial photography?
Yeah.
I'm not so sure that there's going to be quite the profit margins that I think will eventually happen as a result of maybe AI technology. I don't know, but that's a concern for me. So now I'm thinking about things that are a little bit different. So be willing to pivot, be willing to have your minds open in terms of like, okay, this is what I'm seeing. Can I shift it while also being true to your brand?
All right. You said the monster's name, AI.
Yeah.
Have you talked to him? Have you played with it at all?
Yes. In certain aspects, right? I don't know if I've done a whole lot from the generative AI,
Okay.
which is like kind of that really wonky stuff.
Right.
I have done some aspects. I've used ChatGPT
Okay.
just for
Right.
shits and giggles, punch some things in, be like, hey, write me up some 20 questions to ask Matt Brown about, AI or something like that. I would do stuff like that. I've used it for AI culling.
Were you impressed with what it gave you back to you? What ChatGPT was it, or were you like, this is juvenile?
No, I mean, it's nuanced a little bit. So some I was not impressed with, and then
Okay.
others I was like, oh, that was actually pretty good.
Yeah.
So for instance, if I wanted to get a contract, if I know nothing about wedding photography, it's my first one, let's say I'm doing that, and I need to draft up a wedding photography contract, well, I could scour the internet for one. Usually they're for sale, or you're going to try to like secretly copy one from somebody else's on their whatever
Right.
site, which is not necessarily a great thing to do either.
Sure.
I would say
Because you don't know if there's any good.
that's true. But going through ChatGPT in like 5 seconds instead of like shopping on Google for 10, 15, 20-minute rabbit hole,
Right.
you can find something that's actually pretty darn good right off the bat.
Good
Now,
enough. Yeah.
now, you and I are not attorneys. We do not know specifically if it is good enough.
Right, the right
We're
language.
We're kind of trusting the fact that maybe it is.
Right.
But I think, from what I've heard, it gets you pretty close to the ballpark.
Yeah. Have you played it all on Photoshop with it and gone down that rabbit hole?
No, not yet. I'm excited to see what it does. I've seen some crazy things.
It's frightening.
Yeah.
And it's only going to get worse because it's a beta, so they've got a blocker on, so you can't do like porn or head swapping over the top. But what you can do, and what you were able to do even before AI on Photoshop with like the liquid tool and body morphing and changing, that kind of goes into that weird boundary of like what's real and what's not. But with AI now, I think the monster needs to be caged. I don't know if you'll ever get all of that toothpaste back in the tube, but you got to get what's out away from the rest of the tube, put the cap back on, and get it under control. Because we think it's cute, but I think it's going to be devastating.
Mm-hmm.
It's if you can do a wedding
Yes.
and you're doing them, and you could tell that bride who didn't get a chance to pull 60 pounds off, or the groom, I could do this. I got a program and it's going to make you look like this. Select the body type you want. That would be frightening. And some people are comfortable with it because, as you know, those filters now you could just get and you can change and do stuff and add all kinds of things. We used to critique when you would over retouch skin. I take the pimples out, I do this, I do that. But now if I could take 60 pounds off a bride
Oh my God.
or a groom, he wants shoulders now. He hadn't hit the gym, but now we're going to jack him up a little bit.
Right.
All the groomsmen now kind of look like,
Like Hemsworths.
right. They've all just come out of a Extraction 3 episode. I mean, that's a slippery slope, and it's here. Does that worry you at all?
It does worry me. Yeah. I mean,
Mike needs a cough drop.
yeah, I think any amount of that much power is concerning from a number of standpoints. One, can make us incredibly lazy, make us unethical. It will change the dynamics of the actual marketplace in general in terms of how it's going to value our skills in itself. So I think of it from that perspective as well. So a devaluation of the photography skills, right? Why would I pay you $10,000 for this campaign? I got to pay for the hair and makeup person. I got to pay for the setup and the studio that we're going to rent or whatever location. Why would I do all of that if we can just do AI?
Right. I mean, think about if you've had a shoot where client X says, hey, Mike, we need our models to look like this, come in, they got to wear this, do this, and they're going to do that. And you could be like, no problem.
Correct.
Now, have you seen much of AI's final product? It's still a little cartoonish. It's not
Yes,
perfect.
I have. I have scrolled through Instagram and, every once in a while it happens. Like you'll see an attractive woman and it's like, wait a second, that looks a little weird.
Right.
It's not quite there.
Where are her skin pores?
Right. But in 5 years from now
Right.
is the question. Like how good is that going to look? And it could look dead ringer.
Yeah. Right now, I feel like it's at Photoshop when it only had 6 tools. When it gets to Photoshop with all of its tools,
Yeah.
oh, God help us.
Yeah.
Right now, I don't think I've seen anything that's totally fooled me. But it's coming, and that's worrisome.
And to your point of, because I was thinking about wedding photography, and one of the reasons why I'm pushing into weddings is actually as a result of not fearing the AI, right?
Yeah.
So, like for instance, when you're shooting product photography and you're a product photographer, well, what the hell? I mean, I don't know if that's going to have a future.
I don't see it having one.
Like product photographers make good money, but it's like, why would I pay you $10,000 for that day rate if I can just AI generate it, get 95% of the way there? And then I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe wedding photography is something that one, I'm naturally okay at. But then two, people are going to want that genuine experience. They're not going to want to have anything change that. But to your point, maybe that bride is, because ethics are getting maybe a little bit lowered in terms of our standards.
Gray.
Right?
Yeah.
People are okay with not having to, like, no, please morph my body, like change
Yeah.
it. Like make me look like, this person.
Right.
And then that becomes a question of like, one, do I feel comfortable with it? And then also two, again, well, why have me there at all?
Right. What the hell am I here for?
Yeah.
Commercial photography, you can see stuff, you walk around the mall, they got banners up, or car photography. They're kind of comfortable with it not being so real. There's a lot of Photoshop work, and sometimes the shadows don't exactly match up, or the car's kind of floating on the rocks as it's driving down on the Ford, F-150. They're fine with it. And I see AI in commercial photography exploding. Like they could just say, put this car here, do this, do that, give me a sunset, and father, son in the background fishing.
That's right. Yeah.
Done. Boom. Make it. Why did I decide what they were wearing, bring the talent, drop them in this location, get a permit, bring the whole crew? It's not sunny. Got to wait a couple days. Sun comes out. All that's out of the equation. That's terrifying because I know a lot of unbelievable commercial photographers, and I'm thankful as all get out that I'm no longer doing that anymore. They've got to be trembling in their boots because it is coming.
Yeah. And I'm curious too, now that I think about it, what would be more concerning for me at this point would be when a client requests something like that. So for instance, I remember several years ago, I was shooting an event and there was a ceremony at the end. There was like this raising of a flag, kind of this thing, but there was no wind, right? So you couldn't really see the flag like waving gloriously.
Sure.
And they were like, "Hey, we really wish there was a waving glorious flag where we could read the print." And I'm like, "Well, the wind wasn't there. I don't know what you want me to do." And now I'm like, "Are they going to ask me for that?" And
Yes,
right?
because they know it could be
yeah.
done.
And honestly, that seems like harmless stuff. Like, sure, we can punch that in, but now you've opened that box, and then it becomes okay. Well, now what do we want to remove from here? What do we want to do this?
We don't like Gary. We're taking him out of the photo.
So it starts off maybe benign. Oh, okay, that's not too big of a deal. Sure, we'll do that. It's for branding. It's not really for like a newspaper, right? So this is your marketing kind of campaign. But at a certain point, when does it become like, okay, well, now we're going to take this person, now we're going to put this person in. We're going to make this person's face completely different. I don't know. That part, I think, once it starts becoming client requests, hey, do this, but add this, remove this, all this stuff.
That questions your soul.
Yeah,
'Cause
a
now
little bit.
You've got to start deciding, okay, do I want to get paid? Do I want to die on this hill? Like, is it really over the top ethics 101 because I put a waving flag in? What's that photo being used for?
Right.
Is it historical? We're not on the top of the mountain with the Marines and we're redoing the photo over again because the flag wasn't big enough. This is just a company.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see the harm in it. But yes, that does add to the slippery slope.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you pour a little oil there and go like, hey, next time I'm good with this
Right.
and this?
Yep. The standards of ethics start to lower. And then you start to extrapolate that in terms of like, okay, well, in 2 years from now, what kind of conversations am I going to be having with this client? They could be like, yeah, let's just, whatever we want to do, we'll just throw in.
Right.
And then how do I feel about that? I was just having an interview with a boudoir photographer, Shayla Pelton, and she was talking to me about like, yeah, she doesn't do body morphing. She doesn't do that stuff. She doesn't use the Liquify tool because she wants her clients to feel you are good enough as you are, which I think is a great branding and a great messaging. But some people will do it, and then at a certain point, it's like, well, if you're willing to shave off this in your on your body and tuck this and do that, then why not go the extra mile, right?
But what if that client requests it and you say no? You're losing out on a $4,000 or $5,000 whatever job, whatever it is.
Yeah, because then they'll go somewhere else.
Right. I know Gary's doing it.
Yeah. No, that's why I think that maybe she has like I don't want to say an advantage, but an area where she can niche down because it's like, I'm the person that shoots you as you are. You could kind of pitch that.
Right.
So that you're going to get the clients that you want.
Right.
But if you do, you might be also missing opportunities because somebody else is like, well, I want to look like Kim Kardashian. I want to look like, Jennifer Lopez. Make me look like that. It's like,
it would be interesting to have her back on in 5 years when AI has become such a monster, or people have become so used to the morph that she's like now working at, Chipotle.
Right.
Like, or does she decide I'm gonna flip on that decision? Because you can only go for so long, and when there's not work, you decide, okay, I got to join. I'm not working. I'm doing only 2 jobs a month instead of 12.
Right.
That's the crazy thing.
And exactly. So that it becomes a dilemma, a conversation internally in terms of like, okay, well, what do I want to do? What am I okay with kind of?
Do I change my brand? Well, it's the old, I don't shoot color. I only shoot black and white, or I only shoot medium format. I don't shoot digital. I only shoot film. Like, you can only hold on to that so long. So she might be only holding that so long because the clients are going to say, I want this.
Yes. And so that kind of goes back to my point of be able to adapt, be able to pivot, because let's say in 4 years from now, that is your client base. Client base is like, we want you, but we want us to be an AI version of us. We want us to look like we did when we were 25, not 35 or 45. Okay, if that's what your client base is coming to tell you, then you have the decision of, do I do it? That's a pivot. Or do I say, no, I don't sleep well at night doing that, so I'm going to pivot to another area.
Right.
And so that becomes the flexibility that I think everybody should really have in their mindset of like, okay, I am doing this for now.
I see AI eating pivots, though. So you're going to be out of pivots because it's going to start to being able to do things that you would be like, well, you would have pivoted to. Oh, I'm going to do commercial photography for cars, commercial photography for airline. Oh God, I don't have anywhere to pivot. And then you're standing there alone with your camera, pivotless.
Well, I think that's kind of where we can kind of go down like I wrote down like a bunch of different niches here that we can kind of just tackle one by one. So these niche areas here. So like, for instance, stock photography.
Oh God, you
gone, right?
Out the window.
Out the window.
Out
right?
the window.
We can say that goodbye. Sports photography.
Oh, gray area.
Gray area, okay.
Very gray area. So I had in 2013 an executive meeting. I'm working with the Angels, and I got a deal with Getty, and the attorney of the company and the CFO, that's the person with the money, strings,
yes,
say, well, is there a way we could remove all of the other photographers so we would have a more competitive edge having all of the images made of Mike Trout? And I was like, no, we cannot remove the media.
right.
Like, no. So when you start to look at post-COVID, how they've removed shooting spots, LeBron James flopping, there's not as many people on the court. Like, it slowly has happened that now there's fewer people making those images.
So they have more exclusivity in terms of certain.
Yes. And so that's going to happen. I guess it's happening. Mm-hmm. That's frightening.
So how does AI play a role in that? Maybe you're thinking.
So we call it entertainment. If we watch a Laker game,
yes,
it's entertainment.
So technically not necessarily journalism per se.
I don't think the NBA calls itself as
News.
news. It's entertainment.
Okay.
Now, they allow human error by having officials who can be emotionally heated and make decisions on prejudice against a player because in the past run-ins with him, or I give this person more of a call, Michael Jordan, than I would, Jim. Mm-hmm. So there's human involvement. If you took it away and you took like tennis, for instance, and you said, we're only going to allow the computer to call when the ball's in and out because it knows by 1/1 millionth of a second when that ball was in and out. Human error is taken out.
Right.
Well, no, all of a sudden, who are you going to argue with? The computer's 100% right.
Yeah. I mean, I think about Greg Maddux.
Yeah.
You think about baseball for sure. Like, how many different calls would be made?
Right.
What kind of career Greg Maddux might have if they hadn't had maybe a little bit of leniency on that two-seamer there.
Oh, guys, umpires moving the box. Even to this day, with baseball, it's not the official strike zone how it's written in the rules, which is at the letters on the jersey. Let's call it at the belt. I mean, if you called it that high, guys would be striking out left and right. So if you start to put AI in it, entertainment, it could happen. I think it's crazy, but we see that fake strike zone now they put on TV.
Okay.
I think that's going to become standard in 5 years. I mean, NFL's got replay. It's going to be more. I mean, even those judgment sports, stuff in the Olympics.
So I guess this comes down to, again, what standards of ethics do you hold and are willing to
the
lower?
Organization.
Correct.
Yeah.
So if the organization has kind of the right to say, hey, you know what? We have a term in the photography industry called ref-ass.
Yeah.
Right? Hey, we got a great shot here, but there's a referee in the frame. Can we take that out? And then again, slippery slope. So, at what point does that become a thing? I have no idea. But it's probably on the table.
Sure.
Like the conversation.
I'm sure it's been discussed, especially in this
Exactly.
last year.
Yeah.
I mean, every industry, it's going to happen. I mean, if you look at the movie industry, the way they're putting images together, morphing people, changing stuff.
I mean, like the movie poster photography industry is like a different thing entirely. And
right.
I'm sure they do all that stuff from the get-go.
Right. So
that's already on the table.
That's
already done.
Right.
Do you think news will ever get to that point? Like, I mean, is there still like a hard divide? Like, yeah, you can't, like people have done it before and they've gotten busted.
Sure.
But like, do you think they will lower their standards as a result of like, well, you know what, our industry might be dying. We need to jack up more.
I would say so, because if you look at it, and it's sad to say this, because of a dying industry, people make, desperate decisions.
Yeah.
I can see that desperate decision being made. We need to put a better photo on the cover. I mean, wasn't it Newsweek that got busted for manipulating OJ's mugshot?
Oh, did they?
During the murder creation? Like Time had the original and Newsweek darkened it up and made it more vignette, kind of darkened his skin tone. They manipulated it, and you wouldn't have noticed if it wasn't side by side next to a non-one. So does the Times, which is in desperate situation, they're selling off other papers, they've got cuts, do they say, well, we'll allow the entertainment section
Yep.
to do this, the food section,
Right.
We won't do it though to the news section for now,
Yeah.
but we'll allow
Down the road.
right, we'll just hold that butt on the back burner, but we'll do the entertainment section if so and so, this press secretary says we can only get access to this actor or actress if we do this. Okay, we'll do it.
Right.
I see it happening. I guarantee you there's been discussions with martinis and lawyers involved on what they can try to do and get away with and still call it under the umbrella of journalism. And what is entertainment and what is journalism?
You and I just kind of came off my podcast episode. We were talking a lot about, the economics of things. And in many ways, I think you follow the same viewpoint here. Follow the money.
Yes.
If the money is going to be there, you have to view them as businesses, not necessarily pillars of truth, right? So, and plus, not to get political, but like in a day like today where I feel like it's one side versus the other, both sides are inherently evil, that's how we view each other.
Right.
Then if it's war, then why not play the unfair game?
Sure.
Right.
There's brass knuckles under those gloves.
So, I think I never thought that would get to that point, but one, I don't know. First of all, I guess, are we seeing that yet? Have there been any situations where like an LA Times photo, a New York Times, a Wall Street Journal, like where something has been completely doctored? Are we seeing that now? Or is it just kind of like we're seeing maybe some potential dominoes in place?
There have always, LA Times has got busted a couple of times. AP's got busted, adding missiles, adding people, subtracting people.
Right. Because the agenda that, most publications do have a bias, I would say. Some are left, some are right, some are sort of neutral.
Trying to play in the
trying
middle.
to play neutral, but, if there's an agenda that's important.
But there's a writer, an editor, and then you go all the way up the org chart. Somebody's got a leaning side.
Right. And we can doctor images in a way just via cropping that's creatively that we don't have to go into that manipulation aspect. We've always been able to do that. If we have like a sparse crowd, but we like cut it down and it shows us like it seems more packed, and maybe that gives us an influence in terms of our photos.
Well,
but that's done somewhat ethically. Now it gets to a point of like, okay, well, why don't we just fill it in?
Well, we do it ethically under this weird, I guess, I don't want to say false flag, but 30 years ago there wasn't a 24-1-4, 1-2, really shallow depth of field.
True.
We could shoot this couple and make it shallow. Well, that's not how our eyes see it naturally, and that's not naturally how it is blowing out that background. But then same thing with a 400-2.8. Like, that's not the way we see it. That's the way the camera sees it, the way we manipulate it. So there's this gray area we've always been okay with. And it's kind of, how far will that pendulum slide? And we get okay with that. It slides again. We're okay with that. And then we look back and we go, I can't believe it slid that far. We're fine with that. We're okay with, well, it was a great photo, but the ball wasn't in it. So I just brought another ball in. It was there. I just cropped it out. It was just above the frame. I just put it in. So it's not like there was never a ball. I just didn't get it in the frame.
Yeah.
That's it. It's a slippery slope.
It is. Have you noticed any of your clients, anybody that you work with, requesting things that are maybe a little bit on that edge?
No. So I just did a shoot for Mizuno, and their biggest issue was in this gym, there was a giant Adidas banner. So their whole thing was just keep the Adidas banner out of it. That's their way of, I guess, the quote unquote most manipulative thing that they've said. Other than that, it was like shoot this very documentary style. So nobody said or questioned whether a lens selection, depth of field. It was shoot it gritty, practice journalism, documentary style. That was it. I haven't had anybody, thank God, yet push me. Now, I've had portraits where people have said, can you do this? Can you do that after the fact? And I was like, well, it's not for journalism. It's not for portrait, for publication. It's for you, your headshot, your this, your that. Sure, I will do that. I'm not going to die on that hill like I don't.
Right.
I don't remove acne or I don't thin an arm or whatever because.
I want you to look good.
Right. I want you to look good, and I'm not going to fault you if you didn't go to the gym for 6 weeks, and if that's on you, or you don't look as young as you did. I mean, I did. I won't name the city, but they're really close to me. I did all of their headshots, city council, and the mayor. So the mayor's lighting was a little different in the background, a little less of a white halo. City council, all people got a little bigger of a halo. Beautiful headshots. Spent a lot of time making sure this light was really, really nice. Well, somebody wanted a little of this taken off and a little bit of this taken off. I got all the city council people and the mayor. When I was done, none of them looked like the original photo. I took one woman who was well into her 60s and made her look like she was very early 40s.
Wow.
Somebody got more hair. Somebody got bags removed. Someone got even thicker eyebrows. More eyebrow. I did lips. I did all this stuff. And they kept coming back.
Right.
Can you do more of that? Less of that? Remove that? So I got it all done because that's what they want. And I'm like, okay. Then I sat down with the PR person of the city afterwards because they were just back and forth on the emails and they hadn't seen the whole process. This was going to city council people have their own PR people. So you're dealing with multiple PR people, multiple mayors, the one for the overall city. I sat down with her, I showed her, and her jaw dropped because I was doing the click before, after. She was like, I think we might have gone too far.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I know. I was telling the other PR person, but they were like, no, that's what so-and-so wants. And now these photos go up on every city building, libraries, banks, post offices, everything that's city property, it goes up. Mayor's on top, the other, and she's like, I'm going to have a meeting. I'm like, yeah, because now everybody in city council looks like they're in their 30s. Every mayor looks like he's in his, it's kind of comical. And she's like, well, she comes back a week later and goes, they decided to keep him.
Really? Okay. Interesting. So again, there's this.
I was shocked, Mike. I was like, what? Like you're, but then these are the same people that was screamed a bloody murder if it's not something they like about a manipulation. Like, I can't believe so-and-so or this or that. I don't know too deep into politics, but you know where it leans, right? Yeah. So that's where it's like, wait a minute. Man, let me pull this photo of you out of my pocket, man.
Wait a second here.
Yeah.
You're not the golden standard here.
Exactly. Oh, well, it was just a headshot. Well,
it's like we made you look like Charlize Theron right here. What are we talking about?
Well, let's talk about your slippery slope you're standing on.
So you've seen it. So
yes.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of tricky.
I joked. I think I did about $100,000 worth of plastic surgery on each person.
That's right.
And I only got a couple of grand for the job. It was a deal.
Yep. So we'll talk about that.
Have you done that?
No, I haven't done anything crazy like that. What I do is usually, instead of doing body morphing and shaping, if I go through Photoshop, I'll usually just change the image size on the width from 100% to 98%.
Okay.
And that actually just takes everything in just a little bit. That's like a wedding photography trick.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a little pinch. So I'll do something like that. And that is manipulative too. But
sure.
I unless somebody requests it for me, and or if I feel like you have to determine what the kind of area is. Yeah. If I'm doing this for a client, I really have to have that conversation about, okay, what are they using it for? If it is just for them, I might say this is fantastic with the exception of just this flap of skin right here or this kind of like
Fold.
Yeah, this fold, maybe their neck, like maybe I'll change it just a little bit. I usually try to always question myself of like, have I gone too far? Like I'll always ask myself like, is that too much? You don't want to make them look like they're just not that person.
Right.
You know, I just don't want to be in that, because again, it's that slippery slope. And that's about the max that I'll do. And it's only usually for personal. Like I'll almost never do that for a client unless they ask, hey, whatever you got to do, make this look great. But then you also have to know, is this for journalism? Is it for something else?
Yeah, is it just for your nightstand?
Right. So you have to have that conversation internally in terms of like what
It's sad that we've gotten there though.
Yeah.
That people look at it and go like, I need to look a certain way. Your grandparents didn't think like that. Your grandfather was just happy he got out of World War II. And your grandmother's just happy he got out of World War II so he didn't have to, marry Gary down the street who's a drooling idiot. Yeah. Right? So she was happy with the way everybody looked. But no, her granddaughter has to look like a size 2.
Well, everything about...
When she's a size 6 and there's nothing wrong with it.
There's nothing wrong with it. But I think people are very cognizant of branding, personal branding. Right? So I have to look a certain way.
Well, we have the power now of personal branding because of the damn phone.
Yeah. Absolutely.
In 1980, my personal brand was really my reputation of who I was, but nobody knew it unless you knew me. Now it's like, oh, here I am with my 600 followers. They know me.
Yeah. And so in so many ways, I think this industry has changed. We've constantly seen it change, right? Mm-hmm. So at a certain point, photography was done a certain way. And then what was the big disruptor? It was digital photography, digital cameras, right? So there was like this huge fear of that.
The weekend warriors came in.
Right. And what it does do is it does lower the entry level, right? Because then once the technology becomes more accessible, it becomes more easy. You don't have to rely on quite the skills. You didn't have to meter every single frame or every area of the scene to create a good exposure and learn lighting. You could just do a lot of things a lot more at a faster pace. Right. That allows people that don't know what they're doing to come in.
Right.
So that does change things, and it's always been that way. But right now, it does feel like this might be a more substantial game changer than even the cell phones were to the digital cameras.
Yeah.
The cell phones were a huge disruptor as well. But
and
now
the point and shoot industry was vanished overnight, gone.
That's true. Oh yeah.
Think about how your dad might have had an Olympus, whatever, blah 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 blah, but he would give mom the point and shoot.
Yes.
You went to the beach,
yes,
at least get something. Or if you went camping or dad didn't want to bring it, you had a point and shoot. And somebody always forgot to take the timestamp off, so you always knew where you were because it would say May 13th, 97 on it. That industry is
dead, right?
Gone, vanished, kaput.
I remember I got my wife before we were married, like years ago, like a decade ago. I got her a point and shoot camera.
Right.
Just to like go around.
To have.
What does that make sense now? Like you wouldn't.
Right.
First of all, like now, because the other areas that made DSLRs or whatever a little bit better, obviously you have shallow depth of field.
Right.
Well, you can do that now on a phone.
Yeah, with an app.
Right.
Ba-ding, ba-da-boom.
All the long exposures, the panoramics, there's all the filters. You can do everything in once. And so it's not only disrupted the camera industry, it's also disrupted like the software industry.
Yep.
Because you had to go through Photoshop.
Yep.
Now you don't have to.
Right.
So that is all major disruptors to the economics of what we do as photographers.
It is shaking it up for sure.
Yep. AI is just a part of it, and it may be a major part of it coming in, but it's a combination of all technology coming in and just being a disruptor. So I just kind of constantly go back to trying to stay ahead of things a little bit, and you can't.
When you look at your 20-year, 25-year, still remaining life cycle, right? Have you changed your whole thought of it in the last year? Or are you worried? Are you seeing avenues? What are you thinking?
I'm usually not too pessimistic about, marketplaces and industries. I'm aware of it and I'm aware of the reality. So when I came into the industry and I wanted to be into sports and news and all that type of stuff, and I felt like, well, maybe this isn't quite profitable for me. I don't really want to do this. And so I would go somewhere else. So I feel like I'm a little bit more of a, like I'm seeking out, those blue oceans as opposed to those red oceans. And I've done that again over and over in a lot of ways, just listening to the marketplace. And so whatever the marketplace is kind of telling me, I'll kind of just like, I'll roll with those punches. And maybe that's not a great piece of advice for people that really want to stick to a branding philosophy of like,
Right.
no, this is who I am, and people are going to come to me that way. But it's just that's what I've done. And so when I look at things like AI as a major disruptor and potentially even greater down the road as it gets really good, then yeah, I think about what is unique about me that AI cannot replace. So I do think a little bit more about my soft skills, like what about me. So for instance, if you look at portrait photography, everybody says, okay, portrait photography, then you have a style, right? You have an off-camera flash, you use a big softbox, you use an ND filter, you shoot super shallow. That's your style. You create the contrast. Okay, whatever. But what about the personal style? Like, what about portrait photography that used to be about like pulling emotion from somebody, right? Now, yes, AI can replace that. Seemingly, AI does a really good job of doing a lot of crazy stuff. But if people want genuine, and they want the real thing, the genuine article, then I think that's where I'm like pushing towards.
That's where you have to.
Right.
But
Is any place safe? Probably not.
I don't think so.
But is there a lesser probability? And so I
or a slower chance of it getting there sooner
exactly.
than
So I look at something like weddings and family and that type of stuff where I'm like, if I'm shooting an engagement session, I don't think they want me to make them look like Beyonce and Chris Hemsworth. Like, I don't think they're going to go crazy. That would be my hope.
But what they might want is that sunset that you can't deliver because it's just not that time of the year in this part of the hemisphere.
Sure. It just happens to be a gray, overcast, cloudy day.
And then you go click, 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 and there's your sunset.
Yeah.
That's
a reality.
That again is the reality, but that again is there's that slippery slope. Oh, let me just get you in the studio, or let me get you in this space. I'm going to shoot and just worry about you, and then I will put you on the beaches of, or the mountains of.
Right.
And you're like.
And the more that we as a community and a culture are okay with pushing those ethical standards down a little bit, then we'll all be okay with it at a certain point, in terms of like, oh yeah, people right now would be like, no, don't change this.
Would you?
But they might in 5 years.
Would you take more family portraits? Let's say it's the holidays, family portraits, or just in general. If you said to your ethics, I'm out the window, let me just shoot you, and I'll put you wherever you want to be.
Would I do that? I don't want to do that.
But what if
would I?
Would all of a sudden, right, where the other woman was the I don't morph boutique, and you become the guy who will put you anywhere in the world.com, and you now notice I'm getting 40 gigs a month.
Right. Yeah, I think at a certain point you have to look at it.
Who are you hurting? Who is it completely disrupting in the industry? Or are you ahead of the curve on something that's coming?
Right. If as long as I sleep well at night, I'm okay with it. If I'm doing something that I feel, for instance, that boudoir photographer that I mentioned, she doesn't want to send that message to people that you are inferior as is.
You're
because,
beautiful.
Yeah. So that's her messaging. So she would not feel comfortable doing that. Do I have that same dilemma if somebody says, we want to be in the tropics, but we're here in Burbank? I probably wouldn't. I'd be like, okay, that's fine. It might look like trash right now, but in a couple of years' time, it might look really good. And if I'm that guy, I'm that guy. I do tend to, like I say, listen to the marketplace a lot. And so whatever they're saying, Mike, you do this well, that's tentatively what I usually do.
Right, and that could come back to, I think we're originally started with like entertainment in the newspaper business. We want to do a photo shoot of Mike in the tropics, but we don't have the budget to send him there. We're going to shoot him in the studio and put him in the tropics, and that's the photo for our cover for entertainment.
Yes,
entertainment this week for the LA Times.
Now, where I would have maybe a little bit of discomfort is if you decided, even though it's a personal shoot, if you wanted to kind of promote that as, hey guys, I'm in the tropics and I'm having a great time.
Right.
Listen, whatever you want to do on your own social media is up to you.
Right.
I would still feel a little bit weird about that. I'd be like, bro, you're not on the top of Mount Everest here. You did. Look at you. You're
I know you. There's no way.
You're wearing
Barely made it up
Birkenstocks.
the office stairs the
Yeah.
other day. You don't do that mountain in Crocs.
Yeah, so I would not feel comfortable with people like pushing that ethical boundary. Just even if it's not necessarily harming anybody, I'd still probably call them out on that, and I'd be like, what are you doing? So, but for those that just want, like this to be in place, like,
Yeah, I mean, the industry's in such shakeup. It's in such just complete toss where National Geographic no longer has staff writers. SI doesn't have staff photographers. New York Times is getting rid of its its sports department. The whole fucking department.
yeah, that's crazy.
The LA Times is owned by a billionaire who's losing so much money he sold off the San Diego Tribune to, a hedge fund company that owns the Register. Like, it's just what is going on in journalism that has, to you and I, a piece of photography in it.
Right. And so where do you see the overall health direction going?
She's in ICU. Like, I don't think people believe anything anymore because of the siloism, right? Oh, the New York Times, the Washington Post are this way, the Wall Street Journal's that way, the, Washington Examiner's that way. So everybody has been splintered off that everybody has decided this is my team and this is my team. And that's
Right.
bad. And I think that is the problem. You start losing subscriptions or readers. I mean, ESPN Disney has said that they are willing to sell ABC because TV is dying. ESPN is allegedly has reached out to sports teams, the NFL, the NBA, about buying parts of ESPN to keep them alive because they're losing so many subscriptions. It used to be 100 million, now they're down to 50. Like, they're just dying out. They said, I read an article where if ESPN wanted to go a la carte, it would cost anywhere between $25 and $30 a month.
Right.
That's not good for the industry because you're spending billions of dollars on all these sports franchises. As a whole, I think it's an absolute ICU situation. Everybody's screaming code red and running down there, and there's your moment. And there's just blood on the table, and people are pumping and squirting, and it's bad. Tourniquets all over the place.
Yeah. So some maybe pants on fire emergency.
Yes.
Close to it?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, Sports Illustrated was where I was going to die.
Yeah.
They don't have a photo staff.
Right.
When National Geographic doesn't have writers and they're not going to sell it in the U.S. anymore, what? That's I grew up on seeing those yellow magazines and pulling them out of my grandfather's office and reading them for hours and staring at beautiful photos. That was something that started my fire. You take the New York Times and say, we're going to remove your whole sports section, which we already had issues with you, New York Times, because we didn't buy with everything you were saying, but now we're going to remove your sports, and now you got to go to the Atlantic, which might not have the same journalism integrity of your paper. Mm-hmm. They might do this for an athlete or not do a story for an athlete. I mean, your journalism integrity goes out the window when you start doing that. And I'm supposed to buy you as healthy?
Right.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think so at all.
So where should people
go?
Yeah, where should people go? Like if this is pants on fire, industry's dying, there are not many great outlets there for people to be a photographer.
The scary thing is I don't know who the adult in the room is, right? If it would always used to be like it was the owner. Well, if the owner is the problem, and like for the LA Times, the guy let his daughter run it and she had an agenda and they're hiring people and only doing stories for a certain way, you're going to alienate your subscription base. That paper used to have 1.2 million subscribers. Now they're down to, I think, less than 500,000. Like, they're just plummeting. And it's probably going down further by the time this podcast comes out. That you sit there and go, well, I don't know how this is happening. Well, you're slivering off. You're not, it used to be that like McDonald's tried to hit everybody. Come on in.
Yeah.
Who's
Right.
Motel 6, right? The guy's got those great. He doesn't say like, oh, if you make six figures, don't come here.
Yeah.
It's anybody. Roadside Hotel, we'll take care of you. Come on in. We're motels. You try to hit your broadest audience, but you've got these segments of journalism or magazines that are trying to hit slivers,
Right.
and then they're shocked when their subscription or readership is down to a sliver. How did that happen? Well,
You alienated.
you've only decided you're serving left-handed South Korean Vietnamese women
Right.
with missing a left foot. Like you've got it down to such a narrow niche that you're stunned.
Yeah. No, I think if you can learn anything from, and I'm not going to bring up specific per se.
Would we do that as freelancers?
No.
No way.
No.
No
We're casting a
way.
wider net.
Yes.
And if you want a brand, that's fine. But what you don't want to do, and we're seeing this now with some major companies and brands. We don't even have to name them. We all know.
We all know.
We all know. What you do is when you alienate your customer base and speak of them with such contempt, you're going to lose that customer base to appease a smaller percentage. Like you're going to get exactly what you expect. Somebody that's just studying business would say, "Oh yeah, that's going to work out very poorly."
Right. If you said you only shot brides and grooms that had a certain body type and a certain skin tone and a certain religion and a certain political party,
Right.
why would you put that on your website
No.
that you've just narrowed it down to 26 people you only shoot in the world?
Yeah, there's a fine line in terms of how much you want to brand, right? Like you
Right.
could be like, I'm the adventure wedding photographer. Like, okay, that's a brand to go down.
Right.
That's a brand identity. But yeah, going down that path of like, okay, we're going to exclude this, and this, and we're going to only have this segment of the population.
But I love that segment.
Yeah. Like, probably not going to work out very well for you.
Yeah.
Probably
But
not.
I'm all in with you,
Yeah.
buddy. That's the scary part.
Yeah.
And you want to sit in the room and go, what are you guys thinking? Where are you going with this? And don't be surprised when you're bleeding out. You did it to yourself. You didn't just cut yourself with a paper cut.
Yeah.
You took a machete
Right.
and you tried to remove a splinter.
Right. Yeah. Not so smart.
Not so smart.
Not so smart.
Yeah.
Looking at this kind of pie chart, I pulled this pie chart up here in terms
My
of.
dad would be so happy.
I know, right? Analytic part of the brain. So I don't know how true this is, but it says about 19.3%, which is the biggest piece of the pie in the photography industry, is portrait related. So you and I were talking about, okay, portraits, like that's a big percentage
Right.
there.
Sports, family. Yeah, I see a lot of that.
like
high school stuff's really big.
The next one is landscape. Landscape's a tricky one too. Like
Say what?
Like landscape photography.
Right. Huh?
Which I don't necessarily buy. I don't know who's making money off of landscape
I see
photography.
beautiful stuff when I'm like at some resort. There's always like that gallery, and you're like, "How's this guy stay open?"
Right.
Trust fund.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like I can see.
$4,000 photo of sailboats, stacked up.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, it's pretty wild. That I can see also being very influenced by AI. Because what the hell?
Yeah, totally. Now you can make any mountain.
That's I think anything in the fine art landscape in general is
Sure.
at risk. It's
Totally.
watch out.
Totally.
Because it's like, okay, I could spend $50,000 for this Peter Lick photograph, or you know what, AI gets me pretty in the ballpark. I could control what I want it to be of.
And it'll get me the frame shape I wanted because I needed to sit in my office here.
Yeah. So all I have to do is pay for the print size,
Right.
but I'm not out $50,000.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I don't have to deal with him.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see here. We talked about sports. We talked about photojournalism. Commercial, we talked a little bit about. Street photography. First of all, I don't really know how people make money in street photography. I'm just naive to that. I don't really know.
I can't imagine. I think that's
like you license that out, maybe find publication. I don't know.
Yeah, who's buying street photography books? Or where are you seeing that up on the wall and you're like, I need to see that photo of that guy in those really cool pants. Mm-hmm. No.
Yeah. But I would say one of the things that I've seen a move from in the photography industry, especially in the last few years, is less of selling the assets that you've made and more about selling your brand, So this is where I think the industry, from a perspective of if you want to make it in the photography industry, I'm not saying that everybody has to go this route, but what you are seeing more of are influencers.
Yeah.
So photography influencers, not just like, socialite influencers. I'm talking, somebody that's really good at doing, like I said, the off-camera flash look. Okay, nobody's paying me to do that, but because I have however many followers, I can create a YouTube channel. I'm going to make my money that way. So I think that becomes a conversation in terms of when people go into this, a lot of really skilled photographers are saying, well, I'm no longer getting the work that I used to get,
Right.
but I might be able to pivot this way. And then some people are like, no way I'm doing that. I've talked to a buddy of mine. I'm like, yeah, you ever thought about like building your other channels to kind of help support your actual photography business? It's like, no, I would never do that stuff. Like, more power to people that want to do it, but I don't want to do that
It's
stuff.
so much work.
Yeah.
So much.
And then it just becomes the person that's like, okay, well, I don't make money off of my photography. I make money off of selling how to do my photography
Right.
style. And do you want to do that?
I do product reviews. I scream about photography.
Right.
I sell my presets because I really can't sell my work, but I can tell you how to make the photo more contrasty and warm. So I got a
Exactly.
preset that I call,
Orange and teal.
yeah, desert sunrise. Then I sell them for $19.95, but I'm gonna send them for you
Yeah.
for $9.95
Right.
with a bundle of 4 other ones. Like Jesus Christ,
You got a bunch of stuff on Etsy and things of that nature. So you got your, I think it's just and there are good ways to supplement, right? So if you're a photographer that if you want to sell your own contracts, throw it up on Etsy. Like, it's a good way to supplement. But I do find that more photographers are doing things like this exclusively because they're not getting necessarily the clients. They're just getting the other photographers
Right.
to buy their products.
a
and
lot of
services.
amateur photographers who want to try to get a leg up, who think
Yeah.
that they've got a career ahead of them.
And I think that's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of photographers, especially ones that have been in the industry for a long time.
Right.
At
I mean,
the
you're-
golden age.
Right. You've got 20 years behind you and 20 years ahead of you, right? You're like in the middle part.
Yeah.
I'm at the back end. I'm 52. The job I've got at Dominguez, they're not relocating. They're not going out of business.
Right.
I'm pretty good.
Yeah.
It's frightening to look like what's ahead when you're 20 right now in college. Holy crap.
Yeah.
Did your high school counselor fail you? Because I don't know if I'm 20 right now, if there's a job in 40 when I'm 40.
Sure. It's going to look very different. I would say that because, I mean, you think about just 15 years ago, you didn't know what an Instagram photographer would be. You didn't know that there would be just a
Light speed.
Yeah.
It's coming at you too.
Yeah.
So what we say in 20 years might only be 4.
Yeah.
It might be so much faster.
And maybe that's a good thing in the sense of like, okay, well, this area is going to contract. That's going to be gone. But maybe something else is going to pop up. The question is, are you going to want to pivot to that?
I mean, to see how fast it's gone, when we were on our each other's podcast previously,
Yeah.
neither one of us had mirrorless cameras.
True.
Now we both have mirrorless cameras. I've got a case over there completely loaded for bear. I've traveled the world with it. It's fantastic. Light speed. And both of us sat in that, I guess, discussion group with the Sony guys. I forgot what year that was. And I felt like, oh, they are so far away. That's never going to come to bear. Boom. They're
Yeah.
the leader.
Right.
Light year speed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as fast as when you and I were telling them what we do and all the discussions we've had with Nikon, that's like moving a granite rock up an icy hill.
Right.
And Sony's gone balls to the wall light speed.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think people realize how fast the next round of technology is coming.
I mean, it shouldn't be a surprise because
But
if
people are stupid, Mike.
that's true.
Right? I think we're stupid in the way of a blind spot. Because we fall in love with the fact that this is my photography.
Yeah.
There's no way you could take it from me. Sometimes you don't have a choice whether it's taken from you or not. You're still a child and dad comes in and rips the controller out of your hand and says, "We're done with Xbox, go to bed."
Yeah.
It might be that way with your career. That AI or something else comes in and says, "It's done."
Right.
Sorry, you don't have a choice. It's done.
Yeah. It
The
really.
lab manager, the printer, right? The blacksmith.
Yeah, you're right. Like done.
What? I can't be a blacksmith anymore? No.
You think about-
the car drives by. It's like, no.
And the other specialties that have arisen, so people that have fallen in love with something that has come as a result of technology improving, it's like, oh man, well now I'm the drone photographer. There's a huge demand for that, right?
Yes.
But then, will that job be replaced?
So I've had that conversation with Jay, and no, only because what they're doing at the high end, whether it's fire, safety, research, AI can't just make up Earth landscape, coverage. Like I was just in Mexico, they're finding these new temples in the Yucatan of Mexico that they were able to discover with AI through thermal imaging. AI can't do that. They can thermal image with a satellite, but with a drone, they can pinpoint and nail it and do a pass. So that's not touching right now. Like he's doing a program at Long Beach State about following sharks
Right.
and how they're migrating up and down the Pacific.
Sure.
AI is not going to touch that.
Okay, yeah.
So that's a weird safety net right now.
Right.
But yet, that's still new technology. And if you don't get in now or yesterday, you're late.
Yep.
Those kids are already in. I mean, have you touched it? Have you played with drones?
No, not yet.
I mean, that's a great tool to have for a portrait. If you're doing an engagement, I'm giving away the cart, not that I do it, but I've seen it, done it. If you do an engagement photo of a couple on a cliffside
Yeah.
and you want a certain shot,
Yeah, you better get that elevation.
you can get it with a drone, and now you've got the Sound of Music look.
And then you just clone other things out that you don't want.
Right. The oil rig,
Yeah.
the whatever. But you could do it at a wedding. I did a wedding at the Hyatt in Huntington, and I mounted, I went to the highest floor, knocked on the room that overlooked the wedding, and I knocked on the door until somebody answered, and I said, hi, da-da-da-da, this is the reason why. Can I hang a remote camera from your balcony, yada, yada, yada. They said, yes, I did it. I shot it from there. Now, I just would fly the drone up to that
Yeah.
height
Yeah.
at a better spot, shoot it real quick and put it down.
Right.
Boom, done
Yeah, exactly.
in 4K.
Yeah, I mean, the technology can be there to help you. I mean, like, not all technology are disruptors in the sense of being bad,
Right,
but it does come with the territory.
right. At some point,
At a certain point,
it can reach up and bite you in the ass.
exactly. Yeah. So you just have to be kind of prepared for that. The other aspect that I was talking about, kind of in adjacent to, being a influencer, are also like brand ambassadors. So I noticed this just walking through WPPI on like the showroom floor,
Oh, yeah.
right? And there are a lot of photographers that are like, in the YouTube space, kind of like YouTube celebrities from a photography standpoint. And you're like, okay, well, I'm curious. I do want to have just the honest conversation with them about like, so do you make money out of photography, or do you just, because you're a brand ambassador and they like your work, you get money through this brand,
Or they're just giving you product. They're not really giving
or they're
you
giving you
money.
product and people are just buying your other product.
Right.
Like, is that the avenue for photographers?
I'm going to say, like you and I know, they're not making money. They're getting product. Because as you and I try to find sponsorships for our podcast,
Sure.
we get a lot of, well, we can give you some product and you can give it away. And I'm
Right.
like, no, I'd like a check.
Yeah. Very easy
Because
to get
I
product.
can't eat your bag
Right.
to stay alive. There's a lot of influencers that, they'll wear those pants or those shoes or they'll wear that bag, but they're not getting a $50,000 check.
No. And certainly not multiple times.
Right.
So you might be able to get like a couple strobes. That's possible.
Right.
But you're not getting a couple strobes every year. You're not getting that monetary value every year. Yeah.
Right.
That's tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like that part of the industry is
How
interesting.
was it walking that floor and seeing those people? Was it weird to see like people that were perceived as major celebrities or figures,
In a way.
and you're like, you can't take a picture to save your soul?
I didn't think too much about that part. But it's interesting to walk around and see people. It's just like seeing a celebrity, and you spend enough time in LA, it becomes, I don't want to say old hat, but it's like, okay,
Right.
and then you move on.
But someone's screaming in the background, there's Carol,
Yeah.
she's the great, whatever photographer. And you're like, her?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, she can't even hold her camera right. Her lens hood's off.
I mean, it's a great experience to go and walk those showroom floors and kind of talk to people and engage with them.
Nah, I've done it. Yeah, it's crazy.
But
Especially the weddings
Yeah.
Bizarre.
Yeah.
So much money.
But yeah, it's really interesting to think about like how the direction of all the subgroup of, your editorial, like is editorial gonna go by the wayside? I'm gonna be shooting one tomorrow morning. I'm shooting, at UCI Health. Like, does that change?
But is that editorial or is that commercial?
That should be editorial, because it's not really, they're not selling any product. I don't think they're selling any product. They're talking about like, actually, maybe you bring up a good point.
See, that's the thing. Editorial is a newspaper. Is it, there's a different grounds of what you can and cannot do and say in an article.
So what they're
commercial, no holds bar. I'm selling a product.
Yeah.
Period.
No. And as long as if you're in that area, if you're in commercial, then yeah, you can pretty much do whatever.
Right. And
that can go by the wayside. And they're like, why pay this guy to do this and show up? For editorial, it's a story about this patient.
Okay.
That's going to be editorial. Like, that's not really going to be about, hey, they have a new clothing line out and you should go support it.
Yes, but then is it editorial because you don't want to? Because there's these weird lines. Some people, like I remember Hanashiro would say USA Today would not like him to use strobe, a flash, because that was not the reality in the room. Or, you could do a strobe for a portrait because that's something you're controlling. So are you changing the environment if you do something with them? But that's editorial, that's commercial. Commercial, you could do whatever. You can make it look like if you added a gel or you shot a certain way. Where's your thing tomorrow falling? Because that decides whether, if it's editorial, AI might not be able to touch it with that certain boundary, but maybe in a couple of years, AI touches that commercial job.
I'm still under the assumption that the editorial versus commercial conversation really comes down to the usage of the images, like how they're going to be used. So I don't think there's any way of them commercializing it, and at least the specific story. Whether they permit or even encourage the use of strobes or gels or what have you, I don't think takes as much place.
Okay.
As opposed to how they will specifically use and license or whatever and promote and publish the image. So if it's there to accomplish to accompany a story, that's one thing. If it's there to primarily sell you on a product or a service, then that's going to be a different type of commercial rate and a commercial usage.
Right.
So in that regard, you have flexibility of, like, if it's commercial, who knows, anything's on the table.
Yeah.
If it's editorial, your hands are tied more, and it's going to be more of like that kind of journalistic, but you can maybe use some strobe, you can do this, but we're not necessarily doing, too many other things. We can maybe remove some stuff from the area that don't serve the story.
Right.
But it's always like a really weird area there.
Yeah, you're tap dancing between this line.
Yeah, and like I've never really known.
If I move that trash can, where do I go?
Can I move that trash can, like, ethically? And it's like, okay, let's move that trash can. And so it's usually like a feature story on a specific person. And so it's more of like, I think of it more of like an editorial portrait.
Right.
Than covering news, where I'm like, you can't move that trash can.
Right.
You can't do this.
Wherever the environment falls, I'm in.
Yeah.
See, I'm at this spot with Dominguez that everything I do is commercial, so I can manipulate. I'm just making pretty pictures.
Right.
So if there's two students and we're doing a picture in front of one of the buildings, and there's something far, far away in the background, we move it. Whatever. But because I need them to be right here between these buildings. So there's this gray area that commercial and editorial fit, and then will AI jump in there at some point and blend them to a way where we're not sure.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're using this tool. Well, it was editorial. We shot them at this location, but the readers respond better to blue sky than an overcast day.
Right.
So click, boom. Hey, we didn't hurt anybody.
Right.
We didn't manipulate them. We just changed a little bit of this.
And so I think it comes down to ultimately the usage of the image. So essentially, what you show up to shoot on that day could be one thing, but it could be something completely different on another day. So, for instance, if I shot a portrait of this person for editorial purposes, and then a month later, we don't reshoot. They just say, now we're going to make this a commercial product.
Right.
Then it changes. So you could shoot one thing and it can be completely two different entities. You could shoot an event. It can be used for commercial. It could be used for editorial as a story. So it really just comes down to ultimately how they're going to use it, which won't necessarily impact. The way it would impact you is you would probably want to shoot it editorially first, just in the possibility of commercial
use.
Yeah. You can't really go the other way.
No, you can't. No.
Quite the same way. It's like you can't just like stage a scene and do all this stuff and
then call it.
And then all of a sudden, like a week later, like, actually, we're going to run this in the LA Times. It's like, well, we totally did this completely differently.
So you know what they do when they do that? It's called photo provided by, or the LA Times will say it's provided by UC Irvine.
Okay.
They won't say it was shot by LA Times photographer.
Gotcha.
So that kind of covers their ass that you move the trash can. And that's like, okay, that's how you get around it. But will that start happening regularly?
Right.
I mean, you go to the grocery store, and if you look at the newsstand, all those magazines that are tabloid stuff, all that stuff's manipulated. None of that stuff's, the way it was seen or shot. It's all being moved around.
Mm-hmm. So when people coming into the industry, we just jumped off my podcast about, maximizing the ROI of going to school. Now they're coming into an industry that, at the very least, is somewhat in flux.
That's
right? It's a generous way to say it.
That's a generous.
Right.
You're sure you're not a parent?
Trying to paint a nice picture.
Yeah, I know.
So,
as a MASH unit is in the background behind you, nothing to see here.
So how do people navigate this? Like, what would you do if you were not 52, if you were 22? You're coming into this now, seeing what you're seeing. You have an idea of like, oh, okay.
I would honestly pivot out.
You would pivot out.
I would
pivot out.
Absolutely go, woof. Boy, that was not the way that I see. And again, I think I brought this up on your podcast. I would look at one of the services and go, okay, photography is still at least being made there, but I would definitely pivot out because I don't see a 30-year, 40-year career. I just at 23,
right?
How you're going to even get to 50? No less 60.
Now, what if you were 35? You're already a dozen years.
I think your age, 40 right now, is the line.
Yeah.
Where you've got 20 years of experience. You could say, hey, I've done this. I've seen this. I've seen a lot of mistakes. I've seen a lot of good things. I know how it's done. My Rolodex has got some meat to it. I can get to 20 and still do some pivoting along the way and be okay. 35, I'm pulling the ejection seat.
You are, okay.
Yeah, because you still 30 years. I don't know. And 35 you still might not be that accomplished. I don't know. Like, the person in play has a lot to say.
It's certainly harder to, I think, pivot out of an industry entirely when you have had all
right.
is what that is.
I think I'm, God, so lucky. I am in an industry I think more people need to look at, and you can be anywhere in the country. And I forgot the number I should know. It's something like thousands, but being and working for a university, not going out of business. They're not relocating. They're not going to get bought out and somebody else is going to take them over. And you can still make unbelievable photos every day. I mean, UPAA, that organization, they make unbelievable stuff. I got a photographer coming on this week. Like, that's where real images are still being made. Great stuff. And your gamut is portraits and science and exploring and research. I just got on, like I said, that field trip to Mexico. Like, I'm still doing all this great stuff. I got a president I'm working with that, he loves photography. That's an industry I think people forget is working for universities.
Right.
Like, when AI is not going to eat it into us. So that gets forgotten. And there's some places that have big teams, staffs.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like Duke is something like 8. That's more people than work at the register.
Wow.
It's frightening to think.
Yeah.
I mean, University of Alabama's athletic department has as many photographers as the register does.
Wow.
That's the athletic department.
Mm-hmm.
Working for a school is the avenue I would say if I was 23, get there fast.
Okay.
That's a great avenue.
Yeah.
And your palette to create is endless.
Right. And more importantly, though, the product, the photography itself is valued.
Still, yeah, and pure.
And that's where you need to find is like you need to find, if you want to be a photographer, you need to find where photography is valued, not go down a rabbit hole of I'm going to chase this client, but that subset of the industry
Right.
is constantly devaluing photography.
Like I do all of my different photographies at one job. I do portrait photography, indoors, outdoors studio. I'm doing a massive headshot day, and that's the best because, yeah, I'm gonna go through and shoot one person every 5 minutes, but I get to meet people.
Yeah.
So now I'm laying the groundwork. The next time I come in, I need a professor. I'm shooting this person, or I need this help from someone in enrollment, or someone's going to tell me a little juicy tidbit about what they're going to be doing coming up in the break. So I use that as a connection when I do staff headshots. Then I do a little bit of sports when we do homecoming. I'm doing event photography. I do day in a life, documentary work with the presidents. I find day in a lives of people on campus. I did one with a custodial gentleman. I did one with the tunnels under our school. I did one with the Black Association that has its own little barber shop on campus. So these guys sitting around there just busting each other's balls for like 4 hours in a barber shop in a little trailer on campus. It's unbelievable. So there's all these stories to be made on a college campus that makes you feel like I'm in like Everytown, USA, a small little town.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic because I'm the little photographer that just runs around and makes all these pretty pictures.
Right.
And they're valued.
Right. That they're valued, and they show that by the quantity of photographers.
Yeah.
Because one person can't do it all.
Right.
So you need to have multiple. So because if you go to looking for jobs where it's like they only have one photographer, well, it's like you're going to have to beat that photographer out. And usually you're not going to beat that photographer out unless you undercut them. So you don't want to play that game. And you find, again, this kind of goes back to find areas that are healthy. You know, who values photography? Are enough people in that, either that company, that brand, that area, succeeding in that space?
Yeah. I mean, one photographer is at Montana State. He was at the academy when we were there. And then Tommy, who's at Montana. These are two guys under 35 making some of the best photos in the industry. They're under 35. They're living in Montana. They've got staffs underneath them. They're both the photo managers. So they got an additional photographer and interns. They live in a part of the country that has seasons. And that alone, we forget because we live in this LA. It doesn't have a season.
Yeah, sure.
Like
Very good point.
People were absolutely panicking when it rained a lot.
Right.
In December, people were like, oh my God, we're going to die. People were building arcs and panicking, gathering up 2 animals of 2. When you have seasons, that is a absolute magical thing to your photography.
Yeah, totally.
Snow,
it really does.
sunset, changing trees,
The
blossoming,
foliage, the colors.
blossoming flowers. We just got hot and bleh, like right, blue sky. We rarely have those western clouds.
We never did that. Yeah,
we never have that kind of
It's
stuff.
always a little bit diffused, or there's no clouds in the sky and it's just sunny.
We never have that. Being in those kind of places, that would excite you as a photographer.
Yes, good point. The variation there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think so. Photography's not dead. That's what you're saying.
It's
not dead.
Industries are dying, and
Yeah.
especially because we, like your pie chart, you start breaking up into the parts of the industry. They're in trauma. Like I would not be telling anybody right now to go into journalism.
I don't think I would either. Like I think it's a useful skill because I think photojournalists tend to be the best problem solvers.
Sure.
So if you want to develop the skill set, absolutely. Like when you're in high school and college and you say, oh, I kind of want to be a photographer, it's like learn a lot of those skill sets, but maybe don't necessarily hitch your wagon to newspaper X, Y, or Z.
Right.
It's like you find other avenues that you can use those skill sets to not only take portraits, but cover a story,
Right.
and do all sorts of things.
When we were doing the academy with Bert, I always said I wanted to do a portrait and rent out one of the hotel rooms,
Yeah.
clean it out like we would for a portrait up in LA in Hollywood, and do portraits in there and show kids how it's done. Because you do those 5-minute press junkets and you walk into a hotel room and you got to make it look different than the other 12 guys who shot it before you.
That's right.
And the other 12 that are coming after
Right.
you.
But you also need to be able to do other things because as we've seen in that area, that spectrum, like I know just from not necessarily doing press junkets myself, but assisting on damn near 100 of them
Right.
over the years.
Being a people person.
Those
Problem solving.
Yeah.
Being an electrician.
Yeah.
Like you name it. Like there's all
Exactly.
kinds of things. A gaffer.
Yeah,
Like
that's
there's
right.
just all kinds of stuff involved.
But that specific area is also seemingly on life support.
Yeah.
Right? Like just the press junket photo shoot. I'm like, man, they don't really want to do this. They care only about the interview, so they don't really need the photo shoots.
Right.
And they'll do video or something like that. But really, like that became, and I just, again, I followed the economics. I saw like, okay, our budget went from here, now it's down here. Now they start cutting out these people. Now they don't use assistants. Now it's like few and far between.
Right. You've had him on your podcast, Dan McMeekin, right? Like he used to live off of that bread and butter all the time,
Yeah,
banging them out. All
exactly.
the ones that Bert can do because he was banging them out left and right.
That's right. Yeah.
If Dan was 25 today, I would grab him by the shoulders
Oh,
and go,
yeah.
Dan, run away, run away.
Yeah. Yeah. I think unless you're so young and you're enticed by the excitement of being around celebrity kind of juices, right? You know,
Right.
you're like, ooh, I can hobnob with this person. But really, once you get beyond that, you're like, oh yeah, there's no economic, foundation here for me to continually
Right.
do
What's
this.
the funnel? What's the long term in it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we talked about this on yours. I don't think people look at the long term long enough and say, where can I be? When you look at you and you're saying, okay, where's Mike in 5 years, 10 years, and you break them down, what do you want to be differently for you in 5 years for your business?
Like in terms of numbers,
Yeah.
just in general. So I would love to be at around 150, and some of that being passive.
Right.
Okay, so not all earned income. Some of it like will be selling through like books and
Right.
and I don't mean like I'm going to write a book. I'm
Right.
talking about like photo books that are already established and built on the site. You just order it and all that type of stuff. So it kind of comes with the products of like being a wedding photographer. You sell packages that way, prints, everything. So there's part of it that's passive, and then the other aspects that are earned income. So like I'd love to get to that, kind of 150 area. That, but also aware, and this goes back to the podcast that we just wrapped up on. You have to learn how to live on not your number one,
Right.
right? So like just in case 150 doesn't happen and you make 50, can you live on 50?
Right.
So, strive for whatever you're trying to strive for. People have even loftier expectations. People are like, I want to make $250,000. I want to make 600,000. Like, okay, great. I'm not trying to cap anybody's ambitions,
Growth,
but
right.
also be aware of like what your reality is. And this comes with experience of like, okay, so I've been doing this for 5 years and I've never made more than $45,000. And my lowest was $33,000. It's like, okay, well now you have a sample size
Right.
of this is what to expect. I would imagine that you'd have an idea of how to live that way, not living like you are making 125, 250.
Right. And you know this. Let's say you want to be at 150, but you make that 50. You might have worked a lot less for that 150. You might have killed yourself to get to 150, and you went from 40 hours a week to 90 hours a week. And every weekend you had a wedding. And so you were editing all week, and there was never any time off. And you're like, okay, is my life worth this 150?
Right. And so that's the other aspect that I should bring up too, is that like, when I think about 150 as being like a kind of a benchmark.
Yeah, benchmark. Yeah.
I have to think about, okay, well, there's only a finite amount of time that I can exert to these
that
weddings.
150, yep.
Like, so if you're going to price yourself at, let's say, $1,000 a wedding, you're not going to do 150 weddings, right?
No.
Just to make the math simple.
Right.
Like, so it's like, okay, well, what if I raised it to 3,000? Or what if I raised it to 5,000? What if my lowest package was 5,000? My high package was 10,000. And then you're like kind of splitting. So you have like a 5,000, you have a 7,500,
Right,
you've got a
right.
10 package. And so you're thinking about like, so I've already had the conversation with myself of like, how many would I want to shoot per year?
Right.
And what do I not really want? Like, I don't want to be the person that shoots 50 weddings a year. I do not want to do that.
You want to be a drooling idiot?
I want to shoot
Even 15,
20 to
even
25 at
15
most.
is a lot.
It's very much a lot. So
That means one a month plus some. Mm-hmm. That is a grind.
it is. And so from
It's like getting married every month.
yeah. Now on that aspect, this is maybe the benefit of some AI is that what can you outsource to some
Yes.
degree to make your life a little bit easier. And so I just started using Aftershoot AI. I haven't had a whole lot of experience with it. It's only been like a gig or two. And I have not really loved the results yet, but I can see the promise in it because it's basically doing a smart cull. Mm-hmm. And I remember also being at WPPI, I was asking people that have used it, and it was like, okay, shoot me straight here. Don't try to sell me on a product. What's the percentage that you're getting? Anything less than like 90 to 95%, like I don't want to entertain.
Right, yeah.
Because otherwise I'm just doing more work.
I got to go back,
Yeah.
re-edit, and then it's a mess.
Right. And so
That's a bad assistant.
exactly. Yeah, it's a bad assessment. You wouldn't hire somebody to like do the job, but then I have to do all the work looking over what you did wrong.
Right. Jesus, Gary, really? That's
Yeah.
what you edited it down to? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But if you can get it to a point, and I'll have to do more testing on it. I didn't invest a whole lot into it, so like I'll just kind of do it. And I did this at my previous wedding. Actually, I did a manual cull of myself. I timed it,
Okay.
and it did the actual Aftershoot cull. Let it run and see how much time it saved me, how accurate it was, and I kind of compared and contrast. I actually
Okay.
did an episode on it. So, but that was interesting to see, and it still favored me doing it manually, just off of that one. But
But is that because you are picky to what you were doing and it's kind of giving you a blanket?
so I don't know if I had the settings quite right, but basically I was able to cull down, God knows how many pictures I took, down to 1,500 pictures to a first cull, right?
Jesus Christ. Yeah, okay.
But I got that 15. The Aftershoot got me 2,500. And I was like, well, I don't want more. I want less.
Right. You'd have been
I
happy with 1,200.
Yeah, I was like, give me 1,000 bangers, right? Like
Yeah.
that's what I want. I don't want more than 1,500. Like I do a 1,500 first cull, and then I can go through with a fine tooth comb and be like, okay, toggling between these two that were like on the fence, maybe like
Yeah. Like,
yeah.
Hand here, hand here, hand here, hand
exactly.
here. Yeah.
And then I can throw that one out, and now it's down to 1,100, and you kind of do that game.
Yes.
So I was still more efficient at doing that than letting Aftershoot do that. But would it surprise me if it got better and better as it goes on? No, because I've talked to enough wedding photographers, and they're like, honestly, once you start stockpiling 5 to 8 weddings and beyond, you have to find some way to outsource this stuff. Like, because you just don't have the time
Sure.
to, do all of the stuff. So it's like, you might outsource the editing itself. You might outsource the culling, something, the book building, just the onboarding clients and the offboarding clients. So some aspects of AI will be helpful to us. Is it perfect? Probably not. But there are the scary aspects that we've talked ad nauseum about in terms of how it's going to impact the industry and in our lives in general. And then there are some areas where it's like, yeah, like denoise this image, or like if you can remove some of these blemishes, like that's great. There's some aspects where you're like, this can be helpful, but again, like everything, you just kind of weigh those, the weight of it.
It's all, you want it to be a good assistant, but it's going to take some time. All right. It's got to learn you. What do you like? What does the client like? Be efficient. And the last thing you want to do is have to go back and double check it.
Yeah, you don't want to do that. Like then you just become a babysitter.
Yeah.
You're doing more work. So before anybody jumped in on the deep end and goes for like the $600 package or something, it's like, try it out. Like usually these programs have like free 14-day trials or something. Give it a shot, do your own testing, see if it's going to be an asset or a liability to you. And then you kind of figure that out.
Right. When you look at that 150 as your goal, how good are you at saying, okay, that 150 comes with how many hours in a week or how many days in a year?
How good am I? How accurate am I at assessing that? Probably not super accurate, but I have an idea. So like if I envision, okay, let's just call it 20 weddings a year,
Okay.
right? My goal is not necessarily to get 20 weddings to equate to 150.
Right.
I still have other clients that can amount to 50.
Right.
So it's like, really, I just need to get to 100 or something around that area. What is going to cannibalize each other? Like if I do this weekend wedding, does this client then lose? Because it's like,
Right.
occupying the same dates. So you think about those aspects. And so I'm like, okay, well, here are a couple main clients that I would like to keep, maybe downsize a little bit because I can make more at the wedding and just add. So it's like kind of having a little bit of both. And again, I don't want to work and
Right,
overkill myself too much because it's like, I like to have a life. I'm not getting younger, and there are
And doing this is only going to get you older.
yeah, it's just right,
Jesus.
And so that's an aspect of like, okay, how do I make this easier, more stress-free, more efficient? How can I leverage AI if it's available to me without destroying my own career? Those are all internal discussions that you kind of have. It's actually actual conversations I do have with my wife in terms of like, okay, here's kind of the number that I'd love to get to. Here's a realistic number we can get to, at least right off the bat. If we're talking about moving across country, we're thinking about that. And so like, what's a time frame that we can really hit the ground running with this? It's like, well, it might take a little bit of time, but that stuff is always, when you're a freelancer, when you're a photographer, like in my opinion, especially as a freelancer, you have to have those dialogues all the time.
All the time.
Because you don't have the consistent W-2 checks coming in, and it's like, oh yeah, you're good. Like you can take 2 years off from thinking. You just kind of show up and you do your job. That's not necessarily my reality and a lot of freelancers' reality. So you just kind of think about that. And if anybody else is working a full-time job, you should try to think more like that as well, because you will have other disruptors like AI come in, and all of a sudden, maybe you have to pivot.
Is the wedding business itself healthy?
From my vantage point, from the people that I've talked to, yes.
So people are still valuing photography.
Yes. Now, you could look at from the macro perspective of like culturally, are more people not getting married,
Okay.
right? Because like culturally, like marriage is no longer seemed as like this foundational sexy
Right.
thing, and we want to oppose that or whatever, independence, all that. So you think about those things. I think about if we're moving to places around the country, what area, what demographics are going to
Right.
be young. You don't want to move too rural where it's just like 5,000 people in that town and they're all 50 years old. It's like, well, how many of them are spouting out kids are going to be getting married, right?
Right.
Like you think about having adjacent areas. So if you're in one area, 100 miles this way, 50 miles this way, 20 miles this way, like there's a bunch of areas that I can maybe reach into that kind of pocket. So you think about that aspect. But I feel optimistic that it's a healthier industry. Well, I say it's the healthiest industry. No, go into something else. But like, if you're stuck on photography and you're stuck into this kind of mode of being a visual creative that way, I like that prospect way more than I ever did. I could tell right off the bat when I started coming to the workshop, and then
Right.
I was like really looking into like, God, I don't know if I should do newspapers. Like, I'm not saying that you can't build a career, but like for me, I'm not as good as some of these other people. So I not only have to scratch and claw to get past them, but I may not make what I want to make.
Right. Right. You might be the best of
And
that and
I
still
might
not
be,
make it.
and I might be making or working extra hours, which is not necessarily a bad thing for people that are hungry and want to prove themselves. But I was like, this is a lot. There's a lot for a little.
Yeah. How is it in an industry like that where you see a decline in people maybe not getting married for you to keep your focus and your creative juices going? Because you're just new to this
Yes.
and you're trying to separate yourself from a pack that's very thick.
Yes. Yeah. Like, how do I separate myself as a upcoming wedding photographer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you just went to a conference where I'm sure you're overly stimulated with all this barrage of like content and what people are making. And you're like, how am I going to do this?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's intimidating because it's just like anything. It's like you're starting something new. You're pivoting. I gained confidence just from showing people my work that were established.
Okay.
And I don't feel like they were the type of people that would just be like, tell him what he needs to hear and like send him on his merry way.
Right.
They were like, no, this work is good. It's not great. It's good. You can make a living here. You can do this and you will get better, but you need to learn the back end.
Right.
You know, you need to learn the business aspect. You need to learn how to, onboard clients. You need to learn how the marketing, which is going to be very different than the marketing that you're used to. What I used to do is a lot more direct marketing. I'm not now going to reach out to newlyweds and say, hey, I found that you just got engaged. Here's my portfolio. That comes across a little bit like stocky, not something that I would recommend doing. So you have to find ways to like use your site.
You don't know me, but I'm this great guy.
You don't know me, but hey. And so you got to be a little bit more, I want to say creative, but you have to think of it a little bit different, like a different angle. And then you also think of it from like the weddings that you are shooting and seeing that as like, this is where all my ideal clients are right now.
Yeah.
How do I leverage this moment right here? So like I'm actively just like not just shooting the bride and groom because they're going to get a billion shots of themselves. I'm trying to pull aside, I don't know who they are. They could be significant to the couple or insignificant. I'm pulling them aside. Hey, let me get a picture of you two like together. I'm doing all these like other things to try to make myself stand out a little bit of like, oh yeah.
Hey, spreading the seed around to see something might grow.
Yeah. And in many ways, like I have mentioned this before, I got a couple weddings just based off of my energy. They had never seen any of my wedding work before. So they hired me because they're like, oh, we like how you worked. We don't know what your images look like, but we saw you engaging with people and we liked how you worked. So we want to hire you. It's a very trusting thing for them to do. But that, again, kind of goes back to have faith in your soft skills, like what you bring to the table, other than just what the visuals are. So I think about stuff like that, like, okay, what can I do to, make somebody trust me, feel less intimidated, that all goes into the pie.
Yeah, no, it's big when you're trying to separate yourself in a new industry of an old industry like photography that has issues. Right? You got things coming along technologically with your camera gear, AI's creeping around. People are more satisfied with just their phone than ever before. Somebody will take your wedding job that you want 5 for. They'll do it for 1,000.
Sure.
They'll sweet talk them into not wanting a book or how you're going to store it, show it. I mean, it's constant battle. Constant battle.
Now, the good thing that I have, in my opinion, that I have an advantage on, or I wouldn't say advantage, I would say it's just a strength of mine, is that I don't really take those battles personally.
Okay.
So I think that's the mistake where people get into it and they're like, oh, well, this person charged, they literally copied my website and they're charging, $2,500 instead of $4,500. I'm like, my aspect is just like, okay, that's life, that's business, right? Like you move on and you figure out your way to strengthen strengthen your leads,
right?
Serve your clients, and let the
sweetheart,
chips.
Your template wasn't that great. Your website.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
You probably copied that from somebody else too. We all did.
It's been taken from 20 other templates and just become morphed a bit by color or font.
That's right. How many truly original, pieces of work?
1994? Come on.
Yeah, exactly. So we all borrow from each other, and but yeah, it's just an industry that I think is really fascinating. I'm at that stage where I'm very excited about it, not where I'm like,
still have some fire.
Oh, a lot, yeah, because it's like, doing other stuff that I've done the last 7-8 years, I roll my eyes at a little bit, where like I'm just like, it's just another day, and I hate being in that position. It just feels stagnant. I think
tough.
we talked about this on your last show, where it's like, you never like being in that position where you just feel like you're just rolling out of bed and you're doing the job and you're going home.
Water.
And I get it. That's part of life. Some days aren't going to be sunshine and rainbows, but this aspect of having something a little bit new, a little bit more invigorating, with a more financial prosperity, with less disruption, on the horizon, I think.
Right.
That all gives me a little bit more enthusiasm for it.
That's good.
Yeah.
Where can people find your wedding stuff?
It's going to be michaeldurrweddings.com.
Going to be.
Yeah.
So you're building.
No, it just hasn't been published.
You got to hit
live.
the publish button, Michael.
But yeah, that's going to go.
What are you waiting for? What for you is the time to hit the publish button?
It's just getting more work up there, getting the blog going, because there's a blog part to the site, And then locking down on my pricing packages. You know, I have a ballpark idea of what numbers that I'd kind of like to hit.
Feel
but like,
confident that,
yeah,
like,
really
these are
like,
them.
you know, like, so the last wedding that I just shot, I was like, I feel like I underpriced myself.
Don't you wish sometimes you could price yourself after the job?
Yeah, yeah.
Because you're like, God, I worked way too hard. Or I
worked
did
way
so
too hard.
much more hours into this. Or
Yeah.
I had to buy a new hard drive.
Right.
Because my God, your wedding filled up, you know.
Right.
This
It's
much.
just like, yeah, like I know, you know, and I started off the first wedding I shot, I think I did 1,500, and then I would go to like 3,000, and now I'm like packaging higher, and each time I'm like, this is worth more than $3,000. This is worth this. And the more I talked to wedding photographers that were established, that were making easy six figures, they were telling me like, yeah, this. I showed them one wedding. They're like, yeah, I'd say you can market yourself at 5,000. That being said, you don't have the business end to be a $5,000 wedding photographer yet. You don't know every single thing that's going to happen to walk your bride and groom, or your groom and groom, or your bride and bride, whatever, like through the process.
Right.
You are not there yet, but the work itself can absolutely be there.
Right.
So you just need to like come along and keep doing it,
Keep
and then like
going.
marketing, and it's a whole new process, but very exciting and fun. So hopefully that'll come out pretty soon. Where I
you
just
have
hit publish.
Do you have a date, a time you want to hit it? Because, you know, wedding season's coming upon us.
You know, I don't have a date, but I should, because dates are really good to use as deadlines. You know, I'll write down a date. What is it, July? You know, the tough thing is like I'm going to be out of the state for the entire month of August.
Can we say the end of August? Give you August 31st?
Yeah, let's shoot for that. August 31st, maybe September 1st.
You gotta.
I got to write something down.
Yeah,
and then,
otherwise it's a slippery slope. You keep pushing yourself, and then prospective clients, they want to see.
That's right. Absolutely.
And you gotta like a marketing, you gotta be able to show stuff. No
Yep.
work to show, then you got nothing.
You got nothing.
You just got talk.
Yep.
Do you feel the health of the photo industry? I say it's in trauma. What do you say? Where do you see it at?
I see it as I'd see it as a minefield. You have to navigate through it. You can find, you know, whatever you want to call it, dry land, or, you know, you can find prosperity, a green pasture, but there are going to be speed bumps. There are going to be obstacles. Absolutely.
Landmines hurt though, Michael.
Landmines are pretty permanent. Maybe I should have used a different analogy.
But you know what? Sometimes that happens. You get fired, the company gets closed.
Yeah.
There are devastating moments.
Yeah. You might lose a limb or two.
Yeah. The job's over. It's done. We closed up shop. We got bought out. We're done.
Yeah.
I mean, the company I was with, Incipio, the year before I got there, they made $500 million, $583 billion, or 583 million. The year I left last year, when they closed shop, they made $10 million.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Crazy.
How do you go from $500 million to 10 million?
That's so much money.
Bad. Yeah. And they did that over 5 years. Bad choices, bad decisions, compounding bad decisions to try to help the other bad decisions. And it was just like, oh, you don't treat diabetes with cotton candy.
Right.
Like, that's not how you do it.
No. And I would say you have to look at what you bring to the table other than just the gear or the tech or even the skill sets that you have.
Yes.
Right? Because like we said, the camera industry went from having a huge, you know, market share. Now it's significantly less because of cell phones. So because you had the top of the line gear and the top of the line lenses and you understood Photoshop, well, like that's becoming less of priority.
Right.
And everybody else has access to something similar to that. So
Brides don't ask you if you got an 8514.
they don't care.
No.
No, they don't care.
They want your ass on time. They want the deliverables, make me look great.
Yep.
And keep my mother-in-law off my ass. I mean,
Yeah.
that's really it.
That's what it comes down to.
Maybe not in that order, too. It might be the other way around.
That's right.
But yeah, it's not about the gear.
No, it's not about that. I think,
Like you, that people saw your energy. That's huge.
yeah, and I don't take that lightly, right? Like, and a number of people have actually mentioned this to me in the past year, uninvitedly. Like, I didn't initiate this and be like, hey, assess my energy level. Do you think it's an attractive quality or not? people have come up to me and said that to me, just saying, hey, you have some really good energy.
Now, here's the thing. Let's say you shot that wedding on a Saturday. If you did a wedding on a Friday the day before, that's the scary part. Like,
fake it till you make it
right,
at that point.
like it's, you're doing all these weddings. They are absolute life sucks. They take so much out of you.
And the other aspect too that we haven't even mentioned, I don't necessarily know, like, I said I want to do this for another 20, 25 years or whatever. But from a wedding game, I kind of look at it at maybe a 10-year window, because I don't see as many 55, 60-year-olds shooting weddings.
Right.
And partly because they've smartened up. They're like, dude, this is exhausting. This is brutal.
It is brutal.
I don't want to do this anymore. So like, I think, if I can do this for a decade or so, like maybe that's all I'm looking at. And then I'm looking to pivot somewhere else again.
Right.
So, but I'll always have that in my back pocket.
You pivot to be the editor.
That's right.
Or you're running the office. You're the guy opening and closing weddings.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I've seen some really inventive stuff. Like there was a person at WPPI. He does same day kind of sneak peeks.
Okay.
So at the wedding, he brings his projector. He's got a system in which he is shooting. He's tagging everything. He knows what the end result in mind. He's got everything ready to go. At dinner, his whole mindset was, if I can, upload a card, then at least I can make a couple images. If I can do a couple images, in time, I can make that into 10. And he starts to like develop this skill set. And now he delivers like same day while people are like, kind of crashing off the dance floor a little bit. Like he'll use a huge tent up there. He'll project this slideshow of like 50 pictures, with a preset and maybe slightly retouched, but like, just a thing to get out there.
Right.
And it just like wows everybody. And everybody, like I said, that's your whole room of ideal clients, right? Everybody that's at that wedding knows somebody else that's probably going to get married, might get married themselves, their son, their daughter, their niece, their nephew. It's like, oh man, you should talk to this person. Sally does this, Frank does this. Like they did this and blew the place out based off of something like that. So I think about like all those little nuances to stand out. Mm-hmm. That's a technology thing, but it's really like he has the ability to do it.
Right.
I could use the same technology. I could get the same, whatever you call it, the projector. I could get the same projector. I use the same software. I use the same cameras, but I can't do that yet. Right. He can. That's his way. That's one of his ways of standing out.
Right.
And so you think about all of those aspects, which include soft skills, your energy, your passion, things of that. I don't just dismiss that as, okay, yeah, that's just somebody saying something nice about me. It's like, okay, that could be an asset of yours.
No, it's
just
huge.
lean in on it.
I'm just happy you were able to keep that energy up for both podcasts.
It's tough. My coffee ran out like an hour ago, so I think we're good.
All right, well, let's go get you a refill. I appreciate it. This has been fun going back to back.
Yes, love it.
Yeah, this is good stuff. I don't know if we've changed the industry, but at least we got it off our chest.
Yeah. I can't imagine anybody else is, clamoring to get Mike Durr back on the podcast. But hey, if there are,
anytime, buddy.
The people's champ, right?
I mean, you know this. We could have done this podcast the other day when we had lunch together, just throwing out mics, because you need to sit with some people and banter about stuff, right?
Oh, that's a good point.
Right? Like my wife doesn't want to sit here and banter about how the industry's going to hell in a handbasket.
Yeah, it's like,
but sometimes you need that, and sometimes you wish, like, God, I wish people had heard that. We were actually making sense.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people making the final calls in our industry that are not having any sense at all.
Mm-hmm.
Bad sense. Bad sense.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So both of our episodes, listen to one and the other, they kind of feed off each other.
They really do.
It's like just having, I would say the wrap up is having a plan of action. And sometimes plans are better than goals.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right? Because your goals could change, but it's like, if you have the plan of like, okay, almost like going through college, plan to change your goal. Mm-hmm. So assume, okay, I'm going to go for this major, but by year 2.5, I might change that. So you have to have a plan to navigate that so that you don't waste all your time.
Right. Have to backtrack.
Yeah.
Start.
Same thing with the photography career or something. It's like, have a plan so that just knowing that you might pivot, you might kind of shift this road here. There's another fork in the road. Okay. We might have to do a hard left turn. All sorts of things that you need to kind of consider about what you're going to do. But having a plan in place in some fashion, keeps you keeps you steady.
Sure, it keeps you on your toes.
Yeah.
You're probably better off getting yourself into the wedding industry now than if you'd done it when you came out of college because of all the battle scars, photojournalism, doing all the work you did. It gets you absolutely prepared.
Oh, I'm so much a better photographer now than I am when I didn't come out of school and go ready into photography. But
10 years ago.
Yeah, 10 years ago, there's no question. I remember people asking me like, hey, can you shoot our wedding? They were like friends. And I was like, yeah, the reality is I'm a garbage photographer. Tell them like,
I'm not there yet.
Yeah, no, like I'm terrible. Like I don't know the process. I don't even know how a wedding goes. I don't have a girlfriend. Like I don't understand any of this stuff. And my photography sucks. Over time, it's gotten significantly better because of all those little battles. You test yourself. You try this, you try that.
Right.
You succeeded this. Here's a small victory. Here's a big loss. And you keep climbing. And then eventually you start to piece together and like, oh, that's actually,
pretty good.
It's pretty good. Certainly compared to what I was. I'm not trying to compare myself to everybody else and like the standards of this is the best wedding photographer in the world. I need to be better than him or her. It's just, am I serving the client? Am I serving them?
Right.
Are they happy with it? And am I consistently getting better? Like I don't want to look at my wedding 2 years ago and say, like, that's better than what I'm doing now. Like that, You don't want to do that.
No.
So you just want to get better and better.
Yeah. Well, the podcast has gotten better and better.
I think so.
We killed it.
Yeah.
We need to get you some coffee.
Yeah.
Probably need to stretch your legs. Your probably knees are numb.
Yeah.
And we'll get you out of here.
But it was fantastic.
This was great,
Thank you
Michael.
for having me on.
We got to do it again, buddy.
Yeah, love it, man.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Michael Durr. If you enjoyed this episode, please click the like button and become a subscriber to the podcast. Remember, you can follow the Just a Good Conversation podcast on Instagram, and you can find all of our past shows at the website at justagoodconversation.com. Thank you for listening.